Only mode.
Welcome to the MEDRA Version Analysis Tool demonstration videocast. The MEDRA Version Analysis Tool, or MVAT, is designed to assist organizations identify the changes that have taken place between any two MEDRA releases. MVAT is a free tool which is part of a MEDRA subscription. This videocast demonstrates the use of this tool. To access MVAT, please go to the following URL you see on your screen: https://mssotools.com/MVAT. Once there, you will be presented with the MVAT login screen. To log in, please supply your subscription ID in the subscriber ID field, and for the password you can either enter your subscription password, which is the same password that's used to access portions of the MSSO website, or the change request ID password, which is the password used to submit MEDRA change requests to the MSSO. Either password will work, and there's no difference in functionality within the application. When you log in for the very first time, you'll be presented with the MVAT End User License Agreement. Please review the information in the End User's License Agreement and click Agree to continue to use the application. Once agreed, you will be brought to the main MVAT home screen. Any subsequent logins will take you to this screen. MVAT comprises three parts, the first of which is called the Version Report Generator, and it's what you see on your screen now. The Version Report Generator compares any two MEDRA releases to produce an exportable version report specific to those releases. To do that, you need to select a starting MEDRA version and ending MEDRA version. The only thing to keep in mind when making this selection is that the starting MEDRA version must be the older of the two versions selected. If you don't do this, you'll receive an error message. For example, if I select MEDRA 14.0 as my starting version and MEDRA 13.0 as my ending version, I'll receive an error message. So let me make a proper selection. In this case, I will select MEDRA 8.0 as my starting version and MEDRA 14.0 as my ending version. To generate a report, click the Run Version Report button. And that will then create a report which identifies the differences between those two versions. This report is broken up into specific subreports. For example, you'll see promotions of LLTs, demotions of PTs, PTs under LLTs, etc. And you can look at the details of these results by clicking on the Details link next to each report. For example, there were 176 primary SOC changes of PTs between these two releases, and I can look at the details here. For information on what each of the reports is showing you, you can click this help file here, this question mark, and it will list out each of the reports and the information contained within them. You have the option to export this information to a spreadsheet. When doing so, you can select specific reports that you're interested in, or the entire set of reports, which is the default in the application. In this case, I will include all reports. And that then generates a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet which you can either open up or you can save to your computer for use later. The spreadsheet contains a summary page which is similar to the screen you just saw prior, and for each report that you selected there is a specific tab dedicated to that report. For example, there were 260 promotions of LLTs between MEDRA 8.0 and 14.0, and there's a specific tab dedicated to that report which lists the details. The next major feature of MVAT is called the Data Impact Report, and it's accessed by clicking the Data Impact Report button on the right-hand side of the screen. The Data Impact Report identifies changes to a specific set of MedRA terms which you upload to MVAT and then compares them to any two MedRA releases. You start off by selecting a starting MedRA version and ending MedRA version. In this case, I'll stick with the MedRA 8.0 to 14.0 comparison. And just like the version report, the starting MedRA version must be the older of the two versions, otherwise you will receive an error message. To continue on, click the Next button, where you'll be asked to upload your data. The specific format that's required is identified here in the Import Data screen. MVAT requires a Microsoft Excel file, which can be either in the older 2003 format or the newer 2007-2010 format. The table itself within the file must have 3 rows, or 3 columns, the first row of which is a header row. MVAT will begin to read data from the second row of the table, so a header row is essential. Now, of the 3 columns, the first one is referred to as the row ID. And this can be something as simple as the row number associated with that row in the table, or it could be a specific identifier to a clinical study that's associated with the MedRA term. While the row ID column is required, the row ID information is not. So if you did not want to include a row ID, you would just leave the column blank. The second row is for the MedRA PT or LLT term name, and the third row is for the PT or LLT code. You can provide either the MedRA term name or the MedRA code, or both. If you provide both, you must make sure that the MedRA code is properly associated with its corresponding MedRA term name, and vice versa. If you fail to do this, you will receive an error message, which we'll demonstrate in a moment. The other thing to keep in mind is that the MedRA version of the imported data should match the selected starting MedRA version. For example, if I'm uploading a spreadsheet that contained MedRA terms that were used in a clinical study coded in MedRA version 8.0, I need to make sure that the selected starting version is MedRA 8.0. Otherwise, my results will not be accurate. To upload a file, click the Browse button and select the file that you are interested in. Click the Next button to continue. At this point, MVAT will analyze your data and identify any errors. As you can see from this example, there is one error in row 189. This is either because the MedRA term name and code are not properly associated, or the MedRA term name or code selected does not exist in the starting MedRA version that you've selected. At this point, you can either go back, fix the error, and rerun the report, repeating the process which has just been demonstrated, or you can continue to run the report at this point. Understand that any errors will not be included as part of the report. To run the report, click the Run Report button. In a few seconds, MVAT will process the information and produce a subset of reports similar to those of the version report that you saw earlier. So for example, you can see that there were a total of 6 demotions from the data that's been uploaded out of a total of 902 between Medra versions 8.0 and 14.0. Just like in the version report generator, you can look at the specific details of those changes, and you also have the option to export that information to a spreadsheet. Additionally, you can unselect certain reports that you're not interested in. In this case, you'll notice that there are a number of reports that have 0 results. So in this case, I will uncheck them since they don't provide me any information. And then I'll export my results to a spreadsheet. Similar to the version report, you'll be presented with a summary page which identifies the total changes, the impact on the data that you've uploaded, and then for each report that you selected yes to, there's a corresponding tab with the details. For example, there are 11 LLTs under different PTs, and you can find that in its associated tab in the spreadsheet. The third function of MVAT is called the search term change function, and it's accessed on the right hand side of the screen by clicking the search term change button. This feature identifies the changes to a single Medra term or code between any 2 selected Medra releases. Just like the version report generator and the data impact report, the selected starting version must be the older of the 2 versions selected. Once you've made your selection, enter either a Medra term name or Medra code in the field provided. In this case, I'll enter a Medra code. And I click the search button to identify the changes. And then that produces the difference of changes between 8.0 and 14.0. For example, this particular code is therapeutic agent poisoning. This LLT was under a PT therapeutic agent toxicity in Medra 8.0, and as a Medra 14.0, this LLT is under PT toxicity to various agents. The changes are highlighted in yellow. As another example, I'll type in the term name tooth fracture. And do a search on that. In this particular case, tooth fracture had a single link to the gastrointestinal disorder SOC in Medra version 8.0. In Medra version 14.0, this term now has 2 links. The primary link is now the injury, poisoning, and procedural complications SOC, with the secondary link the original link to the gastrointestinal disorder SOC, but now that's the secondary link. It should be noted that changes for the intermediate versions, in other words, the versions between 8.0 and 14.0, are not shown here. Just the difference between the 2 selected versions. This concludes the MVAT demo. Thank you very much for watching.